The most common reason your target says no, and how to overcome it. The reason that word no comes out of people's mouths is because it is an instant reaction. They did this or something like this before, and they determined quickly it was a bad decision. About 90% of all no's come from this background. Now pay close attention. Covert persuasion fact. No is an instant reaction and doesn't mean anything. People don't know why they say no. They don't know why they do what they do, especially in retrospect, and they will perform opposite behaviors depending on the words you use in each communication you have. In other words, people are utterly out of control until the covert persuasion expert walks in the door. Imagine you're enjoying a shower. All of a sudden the water turns cold. You turn around in the shower and quickly turn the temperature up. But it doesn't go up. Someone else is using the hot water in the house. You turn it off instantly. That relaxing 20-minute shower has been destroyed. 6 months later, you still remember the episode as someone being incredibly rude and that it was a bad shower. You absolutely don't remember the previous 20 minutes of relaxation. The next day, you take a 5-minute shower. It feels good, warm, relaxing. But you remember that someone will probably start using the hot water, so you get out fairly quickly, and it was a nice shower. Relaxing, if short. And later that week, you remember that it was a good shower. All relationships have ups and downs. Most of the time, they're in the middle. Much of your time is spent working, cleaning the house. You are not focusing on the relationship with your housemate. Then you go through a period where the two of you argue, fight, and bicker. Ugh. It's horrible. Time for a new relationship. The news is broken. Arguments escalate. You knew it. And for the rest of your life, you tell people that you can't believe you stuck with that relationship for 25 years. In order to understand how to influence others, you need to understand how people make decisions, how they remember the past, and how they see the future. This is what has been missing for many and what makes persuasion a numbers game for most. As you've seen from the above examples. 1. People remember peak experiences, especially the really bad ones. 2. They certainly remember how things end. Covert persuasion trick. People remember peak experiences and how things end. When asking about your competitor, elicit the peak experiences and the customer's last experience. When changing your customer's state of mind, have him bring you to peak experiences and remember the last time he bought something that was a brilliant purchase. 3. People do not see the future clearly. They do not know how they will feel when certain events come to pass, even if they're looking forward to them. You will see that all of this is crucial in communication, persuasion, and obviously your business and relationships. Covert persuasion tactic. People experience fear because they don't see the future clearly. It's ambiguous. It's scary. It's a no, until you bring them out there safely. In fact, this might be some of the most important information you have ever learned. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and then that person says, "Why did you say that?" "I didn't say that." "Yes, you did. I heard you." "I did not." That night in separate conversations, both of you make the other person out to be an idiot or thoughtless or something else that isn't positive. Clearly one of you is incorrect, but both of you are equally certain that your memory is correct. The fact is that trying to resolve this is impossible. This is the problem of memory. The brain makes stuff up out of thin air to fill in blank spots. Everyone experiences these moments where they said or heard or saw something that actually wasn't articulated or heard. You can't convince a brain otherwise because it was there. Now, if you can't rely on memory to know what really happened 30 seconds ago, how can you rely on it for accurately representing what happened in the past? Answer: you can't, but only you know this. You know this if you read Coffee with Kevin Hogan, the must-have e-zine that comes every week in your email box. Subscribe at www.kevinhogan.com. The other person doesn't read coffee. Therefore, you have to either move past this point or give him a short course in neuroscience. You can start with this. In one recent research study, people were having a necessary colonoscopy. During the process, they were asked to report their level of discomfort at regular intervals. At the end of the process, for one group, the scope was allowed to simply not move for a minute right before it was removed. The other group had the scopes removed a minute earlier, when the colonoscopy was actually finished, and with no additional minute of rest. Results. The group who had the scope in longer but finished easier remember the colonoscopy very differently from those who had the shorter time colonoscopy. The colonoscopy group that had the extra minute of no scope movement while still inserted remembered the colonoscopy as not that bad. The group that had no extra moments of rest remembered it as much worse. Covert persuasion trick. Key point. When matched with how people actually reported they felt at each interval in the moment, memory reflected the end of the memory and not the entire experience. People remember how it finished and generalize it back to the rest of the experience. Strategy. At each step, know that the person you are talking with does not operate with a video camera in his mind. He operates on his memories. It doesn't matter if they are accurate or not. Therefore, you need to clearly show how not acting will have dire consequences. Then you must show how both decisions could play out along with the probabilities of both. For people who lost money in the stock market, you can understand their interest in staying in the money market. Unfortunately, the reality is that they are probably going to go broke if they do that. You simply can't tell them to ignore the past. You must point out that it could happen again, though it is more likely that because the environment is not completely different, typical results are more likely. The research in persuasion is clear. You must point out both possible futures for you to be successful. Otherwise, the person will be destined to go with what he feels instead of what makes sense. The phobia of losing is tough to get past without at least acknowledging and examining those possible outcomes. Then finish with a very clear picture of a very likely future. If you paint it too rosy, you will both lose. The other person will feel manipulated. If you paint it realistically, there is an excellent chance that he will respond appropriately. Ultimately, the stock market crashed, the Titanic sank, the Twin Towers went down, but that is not a reason to avoid the stock market, boating, or tall buildings. In fact, having failed in the first 2 quarters of the game is all the more reason to try harder in the second half. That is the message that needs to be made clear to your clients, and they will get it if you use that metaphor. Never let a bad result in the past turn your client into a non-client. Introducing Omega Strategies. Knowles, Crawford, and Lynn might sound like a legal team, but they are a group of professors at the University of Arkansas, and for the past several years, they have done more research into reducing resistance than anyone I know. Their work has influenced mine greatly. Reducing resistance is accomplished with what the good doctors call Omega strategies. An Omega strategy is a persuasion strategy that does not try to improve or enhance the value of the product, but is solely focused on reducing reactance and resistance in the process of persuasion. To know that reciprocity is effective is one thing. To know how and when to induce reciprocity is quite another. To know that asking for a favor can be a powerful technique of influence is different from knowing when to ask and how. I want to show you how to communicate persuasively using a couple of separate techniques of influence, and I also want to show you what not to do. Son, if you do that you will kill yourself, said Mom, and the son went right back to doing it again, remember? Mom neglected a key factor of influence that almost everyone forgets. Make a note. $10,000 covert persuasion tactic. Give specific instructions or steps when directing or attempting to influence behavior. Simply telling someone to stop doing something or to get a job or behave or shut up is utterly and completely destined to fail because these are not instructions. Decades of research reveal that specific instructions are necessary to influence and induce compliance. What does this mean to you? It means that you need to walk people step by step through a process that leads them to the door you ultimately want them to open. Anything short of doing this is unlikely to succeed in the short or long term. I could detail all of the research and go in depth here, but I'll save that for the newly available Science of Influence CD program, now available at www.kevinhogan.com. Instead, I want to direct your attention to another technique that can be remarkably influential or explode in your face: fear. Fear is something we are all wired to fight or flee from. Our irrational fears are those that we attempt to conquer and overcome. No one likes to experience fear. Fear literally can motivate people in ways few other things can. If you have sex without a condom, you could get AIDS. That statement could induce fear or not. It could induce a behavioral change, but it probably won't. The word AIDS now is a bit like accident. The public has been inoculated to the word through overuse. Imagine that you keep smoking those cigarettes and what you see is your kids and your grandkids coming to look at you in your casket, crying because they can't speak with you anymore because you committed a slow suicide with tobacco. Your face is shriveled and they will never think of you in the same way. That is a scary scenario for most people with children. Let's follow it up with, and if you cut to half of a pack of cigarettes each day this month and to a cigarette each day next month and finally throw the pack away, wouldn't it be something to see you healthy and happy, having fun playing with those grandkids? What happened here? We scared the hell out of our friend and then we gave him a specific set of instructions to follow. That's persuasive. However, in the case of cigarette smokers, they may have heard it 50,000 times, in which case they are vaccinated against your proposal and they will not pay attention to your petition. Once a person has heard the same words or concepts over and over, the words become impotent. What to do? And is it ethical? That's an interesting question, and books have been written about such things. I don't know the answer to the question, but I'm glad we brought it up. A good rule of thumb is to always act in the very best interests of everyone you communicate with. The lesson here is simple. If you are going to use fear in a communication in order to foster change or alter behavior or encourage someone to buy your product, idea, or service, you must also include a step-by-step set of instructions in your message in order for it to be successful. The first covert formula for change. Negative emotions plus behavioral plan equals behavioral change. What happens when two scary or anxiety-producing experiences compete with each other for the person's behavioral response? Academic researchers have been studying anticipated regret for the last few years, and here is a scenario that was proposed to 164 UCLA students. You've parked your car in the lot, and you are rushing to class for an important quiz you don't want to be late for. You realize on the way that you may have left your car unlocked. Half of the students were then told to imagine how they would feel if they go back to the car, find it was locked all along, and now they have missed the quiz. The other half of the students were then told to imagine how they would feel if they didn't go back to the car, took the quiz, only to come back to the car and discover it had been vandalized. How would they feel then? All students were then asked whether they would go back to the car or go to take the quiz. Of those told to imagine the car vandalized, 69% said they would return to the car and check to see if the doors were locked. Those who were told they would miss the quiz? 34.5% said they'd go back and check on the car. A control group showed 46% returning to check on the car. Lesson. In general, where the students experienced anticipated regret, they said they would take the action appropriate to prevent the regret from happening. We all know that what people say they will do and what they actually do in real life are very different things. Later research has in fact validated this fact. Where people experience anticipated regret, they tend to take action to prevent the regret. As people of influence, that's a mighty important thing to remember. Covert Power Project. Write down 10 things you can do in your business where if people don't take advantage of your product or service, these negative things will happen to them. In other words, how can you take advantage of the concept of anticipated regret? Covert persuasion, changing beliefs. Beliefs stick like super glue in the brain when you are attempting to persuade someone who believes something that runs counter to your proposal. You want your clients to buy you, your product, and your service. They have a belief about you, your product, and your service. You want to change it and have proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that their belief is wrong and that evidence you have is correct. They will not buy from you if you show them that evidence, even if it is crystal clear proof. You face an uphill battle. How uphill? You already know that people stick with political parties and religions regardless of evidence to the contrary. I remember when the California campaign to elect Bob Dole president asked for my assistance in 1996. I said no. Part of the platform at the time in the Republican Party was that cigarettes aren't that bad for you. How idiotic can you get? But tobacco was putting big money into the Dole campaign. They therefore were downplaying the negative effects of tobacco, and I wasn't interested in being associated with anything like that. My belief was strong that promoting the idea that tobacco is less deadly than it is would simply be wrong. I would never be able to live with myself. It took almost 10 seconds to make this decision. Political and religious beliefs run deep because of the degree that they are defended against others who believe otherwise. The more beliefs are defended, the more deeply entrenched they become. As humans become emotionally intense about their beliefs, they become more difficult to overcome with logic or even outright facts that completely banish the belief from a logical mind. Logic alone rarely can eliminate a belief. Typically, only other beliefs can help in unseating beliefs. But what about beliefs that aren't defended as much? What if the belief is not about being a Democrat or Catholic, Republican, or Jew? What if the belief has much less involvement at the emotional level? How would you test this to know we weren't guessing about a philosophy of persuasion instead of a factual understanding? You would have to induce a belief, then try to change it. Two groups of people were given brief descriptions and questionnaires about a quality that makes firefighters successful or not at their job. One group was given substantial information that successful firefighters are risk-taking individuals. The other group was given substantial information supporting the idea that firefighters who are not successful tend to be risk-takers. Then the experimenter totally discredited the information he gave the participants. It was completely fictitious. I made it up. There is no evidence one way or the other. What happened? Those who were told that good firefighters are risk-takers continued to believe what they had come to believe. Those who were told that good firefighters are not risk-takers continued to believe what they had come to believe. There was no change. In a later follow-up study, when the participants were asked why they believed what they had come to believe, their belief strengthened after they had given the causal explanation. Interesting note. Participants did not explain that the reason for their belief was because of the experiment they took part in. In each case it was attributed to other reasons. Many did not remember they even received this information in an experiment. Now, here's some scary news about people's beliefs from research. Two groups of people were surveyed for their beliefs about capital punishment as a deterrent to the crime of murder. Then each person in the two groups was given an article. Half the people in each group got an article that revealed that, in general, murder rates drop in states where capital punishment is made law. The other half of the people in each group were given an article that revealed that, in general, murder rates do not drop in states where capital punishment becomes law. Results? The original beliefs were substantially changed not in the direction of the evidence they were presented, but the opposite. Those who were shown that capital punishment didn't deter murder believed more strongly that it did if they had believed that in the first place. In the next few chapters, I'll show you what you need to know about the different types of beliefs, how they come to be so intensely defended, and the very few strategies that actually work in unplugging erroneous beliefs. Many people attempt to persuade others by telling them what happened to themselves in a certain circumstance. Or to someone like the client, these strategies have been proven not to work. What does work is when you can get clients to imagine themselves performing the target behavior you need them to and experiencing that behavior in some way. Covert power with skeptical and gullible people. What do you think? Is resistance a thing that can be used up and replenished, like water in a tank? Experiment. Students were divided into gullible and skeptical groups based upon interview questions. They were then further divided groups into 4 subgroups. The first group was shown 7 video clips of unfamiliar candidates running for office and where they stood on the issues. One group was asked to pay particular attention to the first clip. The other 3 groups were told to pay attention to the last point. 2 of these last 3 groups were shown a travelogue of Fiji before the last video was shown. One of these 2 remaining groups was told to think positively about Fiji. The other remaining group was told to make a list of all things that could go wrong on a trip to the islands. Finally, all subjects had to criticize each advertisement and candidate. Gullible subjects used their resistance to advertising early on. They became less critical of the candidates as the experiment proceeded. The clips were shown in different orders to different students. Reaction to the final clip depended on the approach that had been taken on the travelogue. If the subjects criticized the Fiji trip, they were more likely to look at the candidate positively. If they were more likely to look positively at the Fiji trip, they were more likely to criticize the candidate. Skeptical subjects reacted differently. Skeptics were least critical of the first candidate and became increasingly more critical as time went on, regardless of the Fiji travelogue. Covert persuasion fact. In gullible people, it is possible to use up resources for resistance, therefore making people less likely to resist your message. Covert Power Project. How can you use up resistance early on with your clients and customers, making them more susceptible to your message?